and before I knew it, I was standing over my stove, staring at our stainless steel kettle, which was making a hissing noise. I glanced toward the counter on my right, noticing that there was a mug with a tea bag resting in the bottom of it, just waiting for hot water to be poured. I hardly remembered putting it there, and I blinked at it, absent-mindedly hoping I chose the right kind of tea, something with caffeine, since I hadn't had my coffee that morning, and I thought the lack of caffeine might be adding to my headache. I blinked at the little paper tag that was hanging at the end of the string, trying to decipher what kind of tea it was. I was relatively sure it was green tea. I thought I remembered taking it out of the box, now that I noticed the delicate green design on the tag. What I probably needed was some kind of specialty medicinal tea for my burning throat. But Abigail and I were both coffee drinkers, so our selection of tea was pretty limited. Plus, I was almost certain that kind wouldn't contain my much-needed caffeine. I got lost in thought, wondering how much caffeine green tea had. My thoughts went in circles as my eyes skimmed the counter. I went from thinking of tea to the fact that I needed to wipe a few crumbs that were around the toaster. Bill and Jana's place boasted beautiful marble countertops, but I noticed the back edge of it, along the backsplash, could use a good wipe down. I told myself I would do that once I was feeling better. The kettle was beginning to hiss more intensely when I heard a knock on the door. The sharp, abrupt sound of it shook me from my daze, and I instantly glanced in that direction. There was a window in the top section of the door, but I couldn't make out who was standing on the other side. It seemed to be a male figure, but all I could see was the edge of a shoulder and part of an arm. I figured it was probably Bill. I didn't feel up to answering the door. I thought about ducking behind the cabinet so that he wouldn't see me. I was already in the process, stepping to the side, when I realized that he might have looked inside before he knocked. Just because he wasn't staring into the window at that moment didn't mean he hadn't seen me already. I had been spacing out, so I wouldn't have known. I stood there for a moment in a sick stupor, wondering if I could get away with simply not answering the door, regardless of whether or not he had seen me. My room was down the hall, and there was no way I could get to it without being seen. Abigail had been here the other time that Bill had come over to look in my throat. She had been the one to let him in. I did not feel like talking to anyone that time, nor did I feel like it now. I loved Bill and everything, but I wanted more than anything to just go back to bed. I thought maybe he would just give up and go away if I didn't answer the door. I stood there for a few seconds, moving slowly as I reached out to gingerly turn the burner off. There was another knock. I saw his arm move up as he used his knuckle to tap on the edge of the door. This time, it was a little louder. I watched as the figure on the other side of the door shifted, and the person standing there began to peek into the house through the window. It was not Bill at all. It was Jake. Jake Reynolds. The Jake Reynolds. Luckily, I was too sick for my body to react the way it normally did. My heart began beating faster at the sight of him, but I was far more indifferent than usual. He squinted through the glass, trying to see in. Jake was a good friend of mine, and had been for years. He was Bill and Jana's nephew, and he also happened to live in this very guest house before Abigail and I moved in. He was familiar enough with the place, and with me, that he shamelessly searched for any sign of life through the window. He smiled when he finally caught sight of me, and before I knew what was happening, he reached for the knob and let himself in. "Sup, KK? I heard you were sick."